Off the bike, now.
Officer, I wasn't speeding.
Don't you understand human language? Idiot!
Sergeant Brett Anderson grabbed her jacket and shoved her aside. The Ducati crashed onto asphalt.
Kneel! Hands up!
She knelt, calm, hands raised. He circled her like something he stepped in.
A $40,000 Ducati.
He laughed.
You stole it.
It's mine. I can prove.
Yours?
He bent down.
Poor penniless black people like you are lucky to even have something to eat.
Face pressed into pavement. Knee on her back. Cuffs snapped tight.
I'll take you to a mental hospital where you'll come to your senses.
She lay still, then whispered.
You're making a terrible mistake.
He pressed harder.
You're the mistake of creation.
But he had no idea what he just did would completely destroy him. But before we get to that, let me take you back. 3 hours earlier, same city, different world. 6:15 in the morning, Savannah, Georgia. The kind of Saturday where the air sits heavy and warm before the sun even clears the trees. Spanish moss hanging low over Bay Street. Sprinklers hissing across front lawns. The neighborhood still half asleep. Inside a red brick townhouse on East Gaston Street, a woman stood in front of her bathroom mirror. No makeup, no jewelry, just a plain white t-shirt and a pair of worn jeans folded on the counter beside her. Her name was Helena Powell. On the wall behind her, framed degrees. Howard University, Yale Law School. A photograph of her shaking hands with the Chief Justice on the day of her federal appointment. Another frame? A folded American flag, triangle tight, from her husband Terrence's 22 years of military service. On weekdays, Helena wore a black robe and sat behind a bench in the United States District Court for the Southern District of Georgia. She decided cases that shaped people's lives. Constitutional rights, civil liberties, federal crimes. But on Saturdays, she wasn't Judge Powell. On Saturdays, she was just a woman who liked to ride. She walked down to the garage and pulled the cover off her cherry red Ducati Panigale. She bought it the week after her Senate confirmation, her one indulgence. Terrence called it her midlife crisis. She called it the only place in the world where nobody needed anything from her. She zipped up her riding jacket, plain black, no insignia, no courthouse ID, nothing that said who she was. That detail would matter later. She rolled the Ducati out into the morning light. The engine turned over with a low growl that rattled the garage walls. She pulled on her helmet, clicked the visor down, and disappeared into the streets of Savannah. The historic district first. Slow curves through Forsyth Park, the smell of fresh-cut grass and coffee drifting out of a cafe on Whitaker Street. Then south toward Thunderbolt, quieter roads, older houses, oak canopies so thick the sunlight came through in coins. She stopped at the gas station on Victory Drive, topped off the tank. The attendant, a kid, maybe 19, said, "Nice bike." She smiled and said thanks. That was it. No one recognized her. No one ever did. Out here, without the robe, she was invisible. And that was exactly how she liked it. Now, here's what makes this story different from every other traffic stop gone wrong. At that exact moment, sitting in her chambers back at the courthouse, was a case file 4 inches thick. Stamped across the front, Crawford versus Savannah Chatham Metropolitan Police Department. A civil rights lawsuit, pattern and practice, racially motivated traffic stops, excessive force, falsified reports. Exposed by 3 years of complaints, dashcam footage, and one very determined plaintiff's attorney named Diane Crawford. Multiple officers named as defendants, and the judge assigned to the case, the one who would decide whether those officers kept their badges or lost everything, was Helena Powell. The same Helena Powell, currently cruising south on Victory Drive, with the wind in her ears and not a single worry on her mind. Now let's go to the other side of town. A white and blue squad car sat idling in a Waffle House parking lot off Duren Avenue. Inside, 2 officers. Behind the wheel, Sergeant Brett Anderson, 18 years on the force, 46 years old, 3 commendations, 14 citizen complaints, every single one dismissed, every single one filed by a black motorist. Beside him, Officer Kyle Dawson, 24, fresh out of the academy, still learning the job, or at least still learning Anderson's version of it. Anderson was in a mood. He stabbed at his hash browns and talked with his mouth full. This lawsuit is a joke, a witch hunt. Some diversity judge is going to sit up there and tell us how to do our jobs? Dawson said nothing, sipped his coffee. I'll tell you what, Anderson continued, crumpling his napkin. If I see anything out of place today, anything, I'm making a stop. Let them write that up in their little report. He tossed $2 on the table and stood up. 10 minutes later, a cherry-red Ducati rolled past his cruiser on Victory Drive. A black woman at the handlebars. Anderson watched it pass. His jaw tightened. Since when do they ride bikes like that? He flipped on his lights. The blue lights hit her mirrors like a slap. Helena glanced down at her speedometer. 31 in a 35 zone. She wasn't speeding, wasn't weaving. Her taillight worked. Her registration was current. There was no reason for this stop. But she knew the drill. She signaled right. Pulled over slowly onto a residential side street lined with live oaks. Cut the engine. Removed her helmet and set it on the tank. Placed both hands on the handlebars where they could be clearly seen. She'd read too many case files to do anything else. The cruiser parked 15 feet behind her. The light bar kept spinning, red and blue streaks crawling across the front of a small white house. A sprinkler ticked in someone's yard. A dog barked twice, then went quiet. A curtain moved in a window across the street. Anderson took his time getting out. He adjusted his belt, touched the top of his holster, popped a piece of gum in his mouth and chewed it slowly. Walked toward her the way a man walks when he wants you to feel small before he even opens his mouth. Dawson followed 3 steps behind, hand resting on his radio. His eyes were already uneasy. Anderson didn't greet her, didn't introduce himself, didn't state the reason for the stop. Nothing. He just stood there, arms crossed, jaw working the gum, eyes moving slowly from the Ducati's exhaust pipes to her riding boots to her face, taking his time, making her wait. You know why I pulled you over? Helena kept her voice level. No, sir, I don't. I was doing 31 in a 35. That's not what my radar said. Then I'd like to see the radar reading, please. Something flickered behind Anderson's eyes. A twitch. A crack in the script. Most people didn't ask to see the radar. Most people apologized immediately. Most people looked at the ground, said, "Sorry, officer, won't happen again." Helena did none of those things. She looked him dead in the eye, calm, patient, like she had all the time in the world. And that bothered him. A lot. Anderson's jaw shifted. He leaned in a step closer, close enough that she could smell the cheap coffee and hash browns on his breath. License and registration. Of course. Helena moved slowly, deliberately. She narrated every movement out loud, a habit she'd developed not from fear, but from studying hundreds of body camera transcripts in her courtroom. I'm reaching into my left jacket pocket for my wallet. She pulled out her license, then reached into the Ducati's side compartment for the registration card, held both out with a steady hand. He snatched them without a word, didn't say thank you. Just turned and walked back to the cruiser like she'd handed him a piece of trash. Dawson stayed behind, standing near the rear wheel, eyes on the ground. He looked like a kid standing outside the principal's office, except the kid wasn't the one in trouble. Helena sat still, hands on the handlebars, morning sun warming the back of her neck, a mockingbird singing somewhere in the oak canopy above her. The air smelled like jasmine and fresh-cut grass. The kind of morning that should have been peaceful. It wasn't. 3 minutes passed. Then 5. Then 8. She knew what he was doing, running her name through every database he could access, hoping something, anything, would come back. A warrant, a flag, an unpaid ticket from 2009, anything to justify what he'd already decided to do before he even turned on his lights. Nothing came back, because there was nothing to find. Not a speeding ticket, not a parking violation, not even a late library book. Helena Powell's record was spotless. And that made everything worse. Because now he had nothing. No reason, no cause, no excuse. Just a black woman on a nice bike who refused to look scared. Anderson walked back, slower this time, heavier. His face had changed. The smirk was still there, but something harder sat behind it now. She was clean, and clean wasn't what he wanted. So he did what officers like him always do when the facts don't cooperate. He lied. Registration doesn't match. Helena blinked. Excuse me? The registration on this vehicle doesn't match our system. Possible stolen motorcycle. That's not possible. I renewed it 8 weeks ago. The card you're holding right now is current. Well, the system says otherwise. Not my problem. Then the system is wrong. I can pull up the confirmation email on my phone if... Did I ask you to reach for your phone? His voice jumped, sharp, loud enough for Dawson to flinch. Keep your hands where I can see them. Do not reach for anything. Helena placed her hands back on the handlebars. Slowly. Fingers spread wide. I'm not reaching for anything, Sergeant. I'm offering to resolve the discrepancy. The only thing you're going to do is step off the bike. On what grounds? The question landed like a glass breaking in a silent room. Anderson's nostrils flared. His neck flushed red above his collar. A vein pulsed at his temple. Nobody asked him that. Nobody. Not on his beat. Especially not someone who looked like her. On a street like this, on a bike like that. On the grounds that I told you to, that's all you need. Sergeant, I'm asking for the legal basis. I have a right to know. You have a right to do what I tell you. Nothing more. Get off the bike before I remove you myself. Helena held his stare for a long, quiet second. She could feel the weight of it, the threat underneath the words. She knew what remove you myself meant. She'd read the medical reports. She'd seen the photographs in her courtroom. Bruised wrists, scraped faces, dislocated shoulders. All from people who were removed during routine stops. She dismounted, slowly. Stood beside the Ducati with her hands at her sides, feet together, back straight, chin up. She looked like someone standing at a podium, not someone being detained on a sidewalk. And that made Anderson furious. You got an attitude problem, you know that? I don't have an attitude, Sergeant. I'm exercising my constitutional rights. Your rights. He repeated it like it tasted bad. Turned to Dawson with a sneer. You hear that, Dawson? She's exercising her rights. Isn't that something? Dawson didn't laugh. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His body camera, clipped to the center of his chest, was recording. The small green light blinked steadily. He said nothing, but his jaw was tight. Anderson turned back to Helena, stepped close enough that his shadow fell over her entirely. Here's what I think. I think you're driving a stolen motorcycle. I think you've got a fake registration. And I think that attitude of yours is about to land you face first on the ground. None of that is true, Sergeant, and I believe you know that. We'll see. He was building a case. Not a real one, a fiction, layering lie on top of lie. Helena could see the architecture of it. She'd read hundreds of transcripts exactly like this from behind her bench. The officer creates a narrative. The narrative justifies the escalation. The escalation justifies the force. And by the time the report gets written, the victim becomes the aggressor. She'd seen this pattern 100 times in her courtroom. She never imagined she'd be living it on a sidewalk. Across the street, a door creaked open. An older black man stepped onto his porch, arms folded, watching. His name was Gerald, 68 years old, retired bailiff from the federal courthouse. He recognized Helena the moment he saw her face. His hand moved slowly toward the phone in his pocket. Behind him, a teenage girl appeared in the doorway. Brianna, 15, already holding her phone up, camera light on, recording. 2 houses down, a woman in a bathrobe stepped onto her front stairs, hand over her mouth. A man walking his dog across the intersection stopped, stood still, watched. The neighborhood was waking up, and it was watching. Anderson didn't notice any of it, didn't see the cameras, didn't see the eyes. He was too focused on Helena, too convinced that the badge on his chest made him untouchable. He pulled a pair of blue latex gloves from his back pocket, stretched them over his fingers one at a time. The snap of rubber echoed off the quiet houses like a small, sharp warning. "Tell you what," he said, smiling for the first time. "Let's see what else you're hiding." Anderson walked toward the Ducati like he owned it. He ran his gloved hand along the gas tank. Slowly, deliberately. The way someone touches something they're about to take from you. He crouched down and looked at the engine, stood back up and circled the bike, taking his time, performing for no one but himself. "Nice bike," he said. "Real nice. Way too nice. Let's have a look inside." Helena's voice came steady. "I do not consent to a search, Sergeant. You have no probable cause." Anderson didn't even turn around. He popped the rear storage compartment and started digging through it with both hands. "No probable cause?" He laughed, a short, ugly sound. "You're nervous, shaking like a leaf. That's probable cause enough for me." "I'm not nervous, and nervousness has never been sufficient cause for a warrantless search. Terry versus Ohio established..." "Terry versus who?" Anderson pulled items out one by one. A bottle of water. He dropped it on the asphalt. A phone charger. He tossed it over his shoulder. A small leather pouch with a tire pressure gauge inside. He unzipped it, looked inside, threw it on the ground. "You've been watching too much TV, sweetheart. This isn't a courtroom. This is my street." He kept digging. Pulled out a pack of tissues, threw it down. A pair of sunglasses in a case. Opened them, tossed them. Every item hit the pavement like punctuation, like he was making a point with each one. At the very bottom of the compartment there was one more item. A courthouse ID lanyard, face down. The clip had caught on the fabric lining, so Anderson didn't grab it. He brushed past it, didn't see the seal, didn't flip it over, just shoved it aside with the back of his hand, and kept looking for something that wasn't there. That lanyard, the one he couldn't be bothered to look at, would end his career. But not yet. He slammed the compartment shut. Nothing. No drugs, no weapon, no contraband. Not a single thing out of place. Just the ordinary belongings of an ordinary woman on an ordinary Saturday morning ride. Anderson stared at the closed compartment for a long second. His jaw worked the gum faster now. He was empty-handed, and he knew it. But admitting that would mean admitting the stop was wrong. And Brett Anderson had never admitted he was wrong about anything in 18 years on the force. So he did what he always did. He made it her fault. He walked back to Helena, stood so close she could feel the heat radiating off his uniform in the morning sun. He looked down at her, 6'1" to her 5'6", and let the silence press against her like a wall. Then he spoke, low, quiet, just for her. You people always got something to hide. Always. Helena didn't flinch, didn't step back, didn't break eye contact. I'm requesting your badge number and your supervisor's name, Sergeant. The words hit him like a match dropped on gasoline. My badge number? His voice cracked upward. He took a step closer, then another. You want my badge number? Are you serious right now? Who do you think you're talking to, huh? Who do you think you are? I'm talking to a public servant who is required by law to identify himself when asked. Public servant. He repeated it slowly, let it sit in the air between them. Then he shook his head. You got a real mouth on you, a real big mouth for someone in your position. His left hand shot forward and grabbed her wrist, hard. He spun her around and slammed her against the side of the Ducati. The bike rocked on its kickstand. Her palms hit the leather seat. It was hot from the sun, burning against her skin. Don't you ever talk to me like you are somebody. Because out here, you're nobody. You understand that? Nobody. Dawson stepped forward. His voice came out thin. Sarge, maybe we should just let her go. There's nothing in the... Back up, Dawson. But Sarge, the compartment was clean. There's no reason to... I said back up. Anderson didn't look at him. His eyes were locked on Helena. His grip on her wrist tightened until his knuckles turned white. This one thinks she's special. Thinks she can throw legal terms at me like she's some kind of lawyer. Let me show her how things work out here in the real world. He kicked her feet apart, grabbed the back of her neck with his free hand, and drove her face first into the asphalt. The pavement was rough, warm. It smelled like motor oil and dust and dried rain. Small stones pressed into her cheek. Her palms scraped against the concrete as he wrenched her arms behind her back. The cuffs clicked. Once. Twice. Each click tighter than it needed to be. Tight enough that the metal edge dug grooves into her skin. Tight enough to leave marks that would still be visible in photographs 3 days later. His knee came down on her spine. Heavy. Deliberate. Not the weight of necessity. The weight of enjoyment. He settled into it the way someone settles into a chair. Comfortable. In no hurry to get up. There you go, he said softly. That's more like it. That's where you belong. Right there, on the ground. Helena's face was pressed sideways against the pavement. She could see the underside of her Ducati, a leaf stuck to the exhaust pipe, an ant crawling along a crack in the asphalt, a piece of broken glass catching the sunlight 2 feet from her nose. The world reduced to 2 inches of dirty concrete. She spoke, voice strained from the weight on her back. But every word was clear. Every word was precise. This is unlawful detention. I have committed no crime, and this stop was conducted without legal basis. Anderson leaned down, his mouth inches from her ear. She could hear him chewing that same piece of gum, could smell the coffee and the sweat and the cheap cologne underneath. You'll find out what crime when I decide what crime. You understand? I decide, not you, not your little legal terms, not your constitution. Me. I'm the law on this street. I'm the judge, the jury, and everything in between. So shut your mouth and stay down. He pressed harder. She felt her ribs compress against the pavement. Her breath came shorter. She closed her eyes. Not in defeat, in discipline. The same discipline that carried her through 3 years of law school, through Senate confirmation hearings, through every courtroom where someone looked at her and saw the wrong thing first. She would not give him the satisfaction of a sound. Across the street, Brianna's hands were shaking, but her phone was steady, rock steady. She'd been recording for 4 minutes and 12 seconds. Every word, every shove, every click of the handcuffs. Every sentence Anderson spoke was now saved on a 16-year-old girl's phone. The older man, Gerald, had already stepped back inside his house. He was on the phone. His voice was low and fast and very, very specific. "This is Gerald Hawkins, retired bailiff, Southern District Federal Courthouse. I'm watching an officer assault Judge Helena Powell on 43rd Street in Thunderbolt. Badge says Anderson. I need the U.S. Marshal Service here, right now. Not local PD, federal." The woman in the bathrobe had crossed the street. She stood on the curb, 20 feet away. "She didn't do anything," she shouted. "Why are you doing this? Leave her alone." Anderson pointed at her without looking up. "Back up, all of you. Back up or I'll arrest every one of you for obstruction. Try me." Nobody moved. Nobody backed up. The phone stayed raised. The eyes stayed open. Anderson grabbed his radio, keyed the mic. "Dispatch, Unit 14, non-compliant suspect on 43rd and Victory. Possible stolen vehicle. Suspect resisted lawful orders. Requesting backup." Every single word was a lie. And every single word was now on the record. Dawson stood 4 feet away. His hands hung at his sides like dead weight. His body camera blinked green. He looked at Helena pressed into the ground, then at Anderson kneeling on top of her, then at the crowd with their phones raised, then back at Helena. He knew this was wrong. Every part of him knew it. His training, his conscience, the oath he swore 5 months ago with his mother in the front row. Everything inside him screamed, do something, say something, step between them. He didn't. He just stood there, jaw clenched, eyes down, and his silence became its own kind of weapon, aimed not at Anderson, but at the woman on the ground. Helena lay still, breathing slow, controlled, counting each breath the way she counted them during her most difficult cases, when testimony turned unbearable, when evidence made the courtroom go quiet, when the only thing standing between justice and chaos was her composure. 1 breath. 2. 3. Then, from inside the Ducati's storage compartment, her phone buzzed. Then again. Then again. The screen lit up through the gap in the compartment lid. Caller ID glowing blue in the shade. Terrence. Anderson glanced at it, rolled his eyes. "Boyfriend's calling," he muttered. "Too bad you can't pick up." It rang again, and again, and again. On the other end of that call was a retired Army colonel who had tracked his wife's location on his phone and was staring at a dot that hadn't moved for 15 minutes on a street where she had no reason to stop. Terrence Powell was already in his car, already driving, already 12 minutes away. But someone else was closer, much closer, and they were already on their way. 2 minutes passed. Anderson was bored now. The rush was fading. Helena was too quiet, too still, too controlled. She wasn't crying, wasn't begging, wasn't giving him anything to feed on. So he went back to the bike. He popped the storage compartment again. This time he dug deeper, shoved aside the phone charger he'd already tossed, pushed past the tire gauge pouch. His fingers caught on something wedged against the lining. the lanyard. He pulled it free and held it up. A standard ID badge on a navy blue strap. He almost tossed it on the ground with everything else. Then he flipped it over. The seal hit him first. Gold, embossed, unmistakable. United States District Court, Southern District of Georgia. Below the seal, a photograph. Helena's face. Same eyes that had stared him down 10 minutes ago. Same calm expression. Same composure he'd mistaken for arrogance. And beneath the photograph, in capital letters, Anderson's hands stopped moving. His fingers went loose around the lanyard. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The gums stopped. The smirk vanished. The color drained from his face like someone had pulled a plug. Dawson saw it over his shoulder. He leaned in, read the name, then read it again. His lips moved without sound. Then he whispered, barely audible, the 5 words that ended everything. "Sarge, that's the judge. That's the judge on our case." Anderson didn't respond. He was staring at the badge the way you stare at a positive test result, the way you stare at a letter that starts with, "We regret to inform you," the way you stare at something when your brain already understands, but your body hasn't caught up yet. The lanyard dangled from his fingers, swinging slowly in the morning breeze. Behind him, on the ground, cheeks still pressed against the dirty asphalt, hands still cuffed behind her back, Helena turned her head. Just enough to see him. Just enough to make eye contact. And she said it. Quiet. Steady. Without a single trace of anger or triumph or vengeance. Just fact. Pure, simple, devastating fact. "Now you know my name, Sergeant. You've been calling me sweetheart, nobody, a mistake of creation. But my name is Judge Helena Powell. And the case file sitting on my desk right now, Crawford versus Savannah Chatham Metropolitan Police Department, has your badge number on page 6. Anderson's legs went soft. He took a step backward, then another. The lanyard slipped from his hand and hit the pavement. "Your Honor, I didn't know. It was a routine." "There was nothing routine about this, Sergeant, and you know it." He stumbled toward her, fumbling with the handcuff key. His fingers were shaking so badly that he dropped it twice. He knelt down and unlocked the cuffs, tried to help her up. She pulled her arm away from him, hard. She didn't want his hands on her. Not now. Not ever again. Helena stood on her own. Slowly. She brushed the gravel from her jacket, straightened her shirt, touched her cheek where the asphalt had scraped the skin raw, looked at the dirt on her fingertips. Then she looked at Anderson. He was standing 3 feet away, mouth open, badge on his chest suddenly looking like the heaviest thing in the world. His partner Dawson had backed up 6 feet and was staring at the ground like it might swallow him whole. The crowd had gone silent. Brianna still held her phone up. Gerald stood on his porch with his arms crossed. The woman in the bathrobe had both hands pressed over her mouth. Nobody moved. Then, from the end of the street, a sound. Low at first, then louder, then impossible to ignore. Sirens. But not the local kind, not Savannah Chatham PD. 2 black SUVs turned the corner at speed. Federal plates, tinted windows. They rolled to a stop 20 feet from the scene. Doors opened simultaneously. Chief Federal Marshal Raymond Caldwell stepped out of the lead vehicle. 6'2", gray hair, 61 years old, 34 years in federal law enforcement. He wore a dark suit and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He took one look at Helena, Scraped cheek, dirt on her jacket, red marks on her wrists where the cuffs had been. And his expression didn't change. It didn't need to. The temperature on the entire street dropped 10 degrees. He turned to Anderson. "Sergeant, step away from the judge, now." Anderson stepped back. His hands rose slightly, instinctively, palms out. The same gesture Helena had made 10 minutes ago when he told her to put her hands up. The irony was perfect. And it was brutal. Caldwell walked past Anderson without another glance. He approached Helena. His voice dropped, low, respectful, furious underneath. "Your Honor, are you hurt?" Helena looked at him. For the first time in the entire encounter, her composure cracked. "Not much. Just a flicker. A tightness around her eyes. A breath held half a second too long. I'm standing, Ray. That's enough for now." Caldwell nodded once, then turned back to face Anderson and Dawson. Anderson, the man who 10 minutes ago had his knee on a federal judge's spine, who called her nobody, who told her she was a mistake of creation, who chewed gum in her ear while she lay cuffed on the ground, was now standing with his hands at his sides, trembling. The badge on his chest caught the morning sunlight. It would be the last time he ever wore it. Anderson started talking the second Caldwell looked at him. Fast, stumbling, desperate, like a man feeling the ground open beneath his feet. "Marshal, this was routine. The registration flagged in our system. I was following protocol. I had no idea who she—" "The registration is valid." Caldwell's voice could cut steel. "I ran it personally on the way here. Current, clean. Registered to Helena R. Powell. Not a single flag. So let's skip the lies, Sergeant. You're already drowning." Anderson pivoted. She was uncooperative, refused to comply with a lawful. She cited Terry versus Ohio. She asked for your badge number. She asked for the legal basis of your stop. Caldwell stepped closer. "That's not non-compliance, Sergeant. That's the United States Constitution. The one you raised your right hand and swore to uphold." Anderson's mouth hung open. Every excuse collapsed before it reached the air. Caldwell extended his hand, palm flat, steady. "Badge, weapon, both of you, now." "Marshal, if we could sit down at the station with Captain Simmons, 10 seconds, badge and weapon in my hand, or I cuff you on this sidewalk in front of every camera on this street." Anderson's fingers crawled to his chest. They shook. He unclipped the badge, 18 years of service in a trembling palm. He stared at it for a second, then placed it in Caldwell's hand. Drew his sidearm, cleared the chamber, laid it on the cruiser's hood with a dull, final sound. Dawson stepped up without being told, badge off, weapon down, handed over in silence. His face had no color left. Two officers, disarmed, debadged, standing in the morning sun with empty hands and nowhere to hide. Brianna's phone still raised, the crowd still watching. 15 minutes later, Captain Lloyd Simmons arrived in a department SUV. 58, career bureaucrat. 30 years of making problems disappear without ever solving them. He stepped out with his chest forward. "Marshal Caldwell, this is clearly a departmental matter. My office can handle an internal—" "Captain." Caldwell didn't look at him. "Your officer assaulted a sitting federal judge. Illegal stop, warrantless search, fabricated probable cause, excessive force, false report to dispatch. This became federal the moment his knee hit her spine. Your jurisdiction here is 0. Simmons looked at Anderson. Anderson stared at the pavement like it was the only safe place left. "Both body cameras and the dash cam are under federal preservation order," Caldwell continued. "Every frame. If anything is deleted, altered, or lost, separate federal felony for everyone involved." "Clear," Simmons said quietly. A marshal stepped forward with evidence bags. Dawson unclipped his camera and dropped it in. Anderson couldn't manage his, fingers shaking too badly. The marshal removed it for him, both cameras still blinking green. Every word from that morning. You people always got something to hide. You're the mistake of creation. You're nobody. Captured. Time-stamped. Sealed in federal evidence. Anderson stared at those bags. For the first time all morning, the man who had smiled while kneeling on a woman's spine looked genuinely terrified. Caldwell pointed at the lead SUV. "Sergeant, you're riding with us." "Am I under arrest?" "Detained for federal questioning. Whether that becomes an arrest depends on the next 48 hours. A marshal opened the rear door. Anderson climbed in. The door shut. Heavy, solid, final. The man who had pinned a judge to the ground and called her a mistake of creation was now in the back of a federal vehicle. No badge, no gun, just empty hands and a silence that swallowed everything. Helena stood beside her Ducati. A female marshal offered a first aid kit. She took a small bandage for the scrape on her cheek. Nothing else. No ambulance, no stretcher. She was standing. That was enough. She pulled out her phone and called Terrence. He answered before the first ring ended. "Helena, where are you? What happened?" Military tight. The voice of a man holding himself together by sheer will. She looked up through the oak canopy. Spanish moss drifting in a breeze she could barely feel. The mockingbird still singing on the same branch, same song, like the whole morning had been ordinary. "I'm okay," she said. A long pause. "I'm okay, Terrence." Her voice held steady, but the silence between those two sentences carried everything the words refused to say. The video hit the internet before Anderson's SUV reached the federal building. Brianna posted it at 9:47 that morning. No caption, no filter, no edits. Just 4 minutes and 38 seconds of raw, uncut footage. A sergeant dragging a woman off a motorcycle, shoving her face into the pavement, kneeling on her spine, and calling her a mistake of creation. By noon, it had 200,000 views. By 6 o'clock, it had 4 million. By midnight, every major news outlet in the country had picked it up. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, ABC. The clip played on loop. The same knee, the same asphalt, the same words, over and over and over. A cycle of footage that wouldn't stop because the country couldn't look away. Then the body camera footage dropped. Federal authorities released it 48 hours later by court order. And it was worse than the phone video. Because the phone video showed what happened from across the street. The body camera showed it from 3 feet away. Every whisper, every insult, every lie, Anderson told dispatch. The audio was crystal clear. You could hear the gum in his mouth. You could hear the cuffs clicking tighter than they needed to. You could hear Helena's voice, steady, calm, citing the law, while a man twice her size pressed her into the ground. The clip of Anderson saying, "You're the mistake of creation," became the most shared video in the country for 3 consecutive days. Reporter Gloria Stanton broke the full story on national television. She was the one who connected the dots, the detail that turned a bad traffic stop into a national scandal. The officer who assaulted a black woman on a Saturday morning was a named defendant in a federal civil rights lawsuit. And the woman he assaulted was the judge assigned to that case. She let that sentence sit in the air for 5 full seconds before continuing. The irony wrote itself. The headlines wrote themselves. Every editorial board in the country had something to say. And none of it was kind to the Savannah-Chatham Metropolitan Police Department. 3 days after the incident, Judge Helena Powell issued a brief public statement. She was recusing herself from Crawford versus Savannah-Chatham Metro PD. not because she had done anything wrong, but because she was now a witness. Her statement was one paragraph long. The final line read, "The law must be impartial, even when, especially when, it has been personally violated." That line was quoted in 46 newspapers the following morning. The Department of Justice moved fast. Within 2 weeks, they opened a formal pattern or practice investigation into the entire Savannah-Chatham Metropolitan Police Department. Not just Anderson, not just one stop, the whole department, the whole culture, every complaint, every dismissal, every file that had been buried. And when they opened Anderson's personnel file, what they found was exactly what everyone suspected, but nobody had proven. 14 prior complaints, every single one filed by a black motorist. Every single one describing the same pattern: pretextual stop, fabricated probable cause, escalation, excessive force. Different names, different streets, different dates. Same story, same officer, same ending. And every single complaint had been investigated and dismissed by the same man, Captain Lloyd Simmons. 14 times, a citizen walked into that precinct and said, "This officer hurt me." 14 times, Simmons stamped the file unfounded and put it back in the drawer. 14 times, the system worked exactly the way it was designed to work, which is to say, it didn't work at all. Simmons was placed on administrative leave the same day. The grand jury convened 6 weeks after the incident. The indictment came back in under 4 hours. Sergeant Brett Anderson was charged on 4 federal counts: deprivation of civil rights under color of law, assault of a federal official, unlawful detention, and filing a false police report. Officer Kyle Dawson was offered a deal: full cooperation, full testimony. In exchange, no prison time. He took it. Dawson sat in a federal courtroom and described everything: the Waffle House conversation, the moment Anderson saw the Ducati, the words, "Since when do they ride bikes like that?" The fabricated registration discrepancy, the illegal search, the force, the lies on the radio. He described standing 3 feet away while a woman was pressed into the ground. He described knowing it was wrong. He described doing nothing. When asked why he didn't intervene, Dawson paused for 11 seconds, then said, "Because I was afraid of him, and I'm not proud of that." The trial lasted 9 days. Anderson's defense attorney argued split-second decision-making, officer discretion, the fog of an uncertain situation. The prosecution played the body camera footage, all 4 minutes, unedited, in a silent courtroom. When the audio reached "You're the mistake of creation," one juror closed her eyes. Another looked at the ceiling. A third stared directly at Anderson. Anderson didn't take the stand. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict came back unanimous: guilty. All counts. Sentencing was scheduled for the following month. The courtroom was packed. Camera crews lined the hallway. Helena Powell was not present. She didn't need to be. The judge, a colleague of Helena's from the Northern District, handed down the sentence without ceremony. Brett Anderson, 12 years in federal prison. No parole eligibility for 10. Anderson stood motionless. His attorney placed a hand on his shoulder. Anderson didn't react. He stared straight ahead, like a man watching his own life leave the room without him. Captain Lloyd Simmons was charged separately: obstruction of justice, civil rights violations for the systematic suppression of 14 complaints over 9 years. His trial lasted 5 days. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty. 6 years, federal prison. The city of Savannah signed a federal consent decree within 90 days. Mandatory body cameras, always on, no exceptions. An independent civilian oversight board. A complete retraining program. and a public review of every excessive force complaint filed in the previous decade. The Crawford case, the lawsuit that started it all, settled with a landmark agreement, the largest civil rights settlement in the state's history. Dawson was dismissed from the force. No prison time, as agreed. He gave a brief public statement outside the courthouse. He said he should have stepped in. He said silence was a choice, and he made the wrong one. It wasn't enough, but it was something. And across the country, in living rooms and classrooms and break rooms and barber shops, people watched the footage one more time. And they remembered the woman on the ground, calm, steady, refusing to scream. And the man above her, who thought his badge made him untouchable. It didn't. 6 months later, on a Saturday morning in Savannah, a cherry-red Ducati rolled down Victory Drive. Same road, same oak canopy, same Spanish moss catching the early light. Same woman at the handlebars. But this time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, close enough to see, far enough to give her space, Terrence Powell rode a midnight blue Harley he'd bought 3 weeks after the incident. He never said why. He didn't need to. Helena knew. It wasn't about the bike. It was about never letting her ride alone again. They didn't talk about it. They just rode. Helena was back on the bench. Same courtroom, same robe, same quiet authority that made attorneys stand a little straighter when she entered. The Crawford case had been reassigned to another judge, and the consent decree was being enforced. New policies, new oversight, new accountability. Slowly, painfully slowly, things were beginning to change. In her chambers, behind her desk, hanging on a hook on the back of the door, was a black riding jacket, torn at the left shoulder, scuffed along the elbow, gravel dust still ground into the leather along the back. She could have thrown it away. She could have replaced it. She kept it. Her law clerk, Diane Crawford, asked her once why she didn't get rid of it. Helena looked at the jacket for a long time, then said, "The robe doesn't protect you from the world, Diane. It just means you have to protect the world better." That jacket reminds me of both. Brianna, the 16-year-old who held her phone steady while her hands shook, received a full scholarship from the Southern Civil Rights Foundation. Helena wrote the recommendation letter herself. 3 paragraphs. The last line read, "Courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is a shaking hand that doesn't put the camera down." Gerald Hawkins, the retired bailiff who made the call, was invited to the federal courthouse for a commendation ceremony. He shook Helena's hand in the lobby afterward. He said, "I just made a phone call, Your Honor. That's all." She held his hand with both of hers and said, "You made the call that mattered, Gerald. Don't ever forget that." And Brett Anderson? 12 years. Federal prison. No cameras. No badge. No authority. No one calling him sergeant. Just a man in a cell with nothing but time and the memory of a Saturday morning when he looked at a woman and saw nothing, and everything he refused to see looked back. No redemption arc, no tearful interview, no second chance documentary, just consequence. Plain, ordinary, irreversible consequence. Some stories don't end with forgiveness. Some stories end with accountability. This is one of those. What do we do when we see it? Not what do we post. Not what do we tweet. What do we actually do? In that moment, on that sidewalk, when a woman is on the ground and a man with a badge is telling everyone to back up. Do you film? Do you call? Do you step forward? Do you stay silent? Gerald made a phone call. Brianna held up a camera. A woman in a bathrobe crossed the street and shouted. None of them wore a badge. None of them had authority. None of them had power. But every single one of them chose to act. And that made all the difference. So here's my question for you, and I mean this. Drop your answer in the comments. Don't scroll past. Tell me, if you were standing on that sidewalk, what would you have done? If this story made you feel something, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe, because we've got more stories coming, and they don't get any easier. One last thing, remember this: the badge doesn't make the person makes the badge. Don't ever forget that.
Here's what I need to say. A badge is supposed to protect people. A title is supposed to serve people. A uniform is supposed to mean something. But the moment you use any of those things to hurt someone, to humiliate them, to crush them, to make them feel like they're less than the human, you don't deserve to wear it. Period. Because the power doesn't make you look good. It just shows the world what was already inside you. Give a good person power, they protect. Give a bad person power, they destroy. The power didn't change them, it just took the mask off. And here's the part that matters most. You don't need a badge to do the right thing. You don't need a title. You don't need authority. All you need is a phone call, a camera, a voice that says, leave her alone. The people with no power who choose to act. They are the ones who change everything, not the man with the badge, not the people without one. So, don't wait for someone with authority to do the right thing. Be the one who does it first. Like, share, and subscribe. Real stories, real justice every week. And remember, the badge doesn't make the person makes the badge. Don't ever forget that.